Hey guys, tonight we journey back in time, way back to a place where the winters are long. The winds howl like wolves, and hair care might involve substances that would make your modern shampoo bottle curl in fear. You find yourself stepping onto the frozen shores of a Viking coastal village. The sky is the color of old pewter. The air smells like salt, smoke, and something no, really actual fish. You wrap your fur-lined cloak tighter as the icy wind slips in between the layers. Beneath your feet, snow crunches over muddy ground. In the distance, smoke rises in slow spirals from thatched rooftops, and seagulls cry overhead like they've seen your future and aren't impressed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through the village gate, more of a crooked wooden arch than any kind of real barrier. And the first thing that hits you isn't the wind, it's the smell. It's not bad, exactly, just assertive. A potent mixture of seaweed, wood smoke, and humanity. People bustle around, wrapped in layers of wool and fur, heads down against the wind. Children chase chickens through the snow. A goat stares at you with what feels like judgment. Ahead, a long rectangular building rises from the center of the village. You're told it's the Langis, the longhouse where families gather for warmth, food, and stories. And also where you'll begin your odd but oddly comforting education on how Viking women managed to keep their hair not just clean but fragrant in a world without shampoo. Salons, or anything remotely resembling a spa. You push open the heavy wooden door. A blast of warmth greets you, along with a thick wave of scent smoke, meat, something herbal, and something else you can't quite place yet. Inside, it's dim, lit only by flickering firelight and a few oil lamps. The walls are lined with benches covered in furs. The air is thick with moisture from boiling pots and breathing people. You blink a few times, letting your eyes adjust. Someone hands you a wooden cup of something hot, probably broth, possibly not. You nod politely and sip. It's single quotes, us ... complicated ... Around the fire pit in the center, several women sit on low stools, their fingers deftly weaving strands of hair into intricate braids. One of them looks up and gestures for you to sit beside her. Her hands don't stop moving. "You're not from around here," she says with a smirk. "Your hair looks like it lost a fight with a storm." You smile awkwardly and take a seat. The woman next to you leans over and sniffs delicately. "Not bad," she says. "We've had worse." As the evening unfolds, you begin to observe just how much care these women take with their hair. Despite the harsh environment, ice, wind, smoke, and approximately a billion reasons not to bother, they are meticulous. Hair is washed, combed, oiled, and styled with an artistry that would make a Roman noblewoman pause. You begin to realize that for Viking women, hair wasn't just hair. It was history, status, power, and sometimes a low-key weapon in the marriage market. You watch as a young girl rubs her hair with a cloth soaked in something from a wooden jar. A sharp, sour smell tickles your nose. "What is that?" you ask. "Wait until tomorrow," says your host with a knowing look. will show you. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Inside, someone starts humming a low, wordless tune. You sip your mysterious broth, lean back against the fur-covered bench, and let the fire warm your face. It's the start of a long night in a long house, and you're only just beginning to understand how complex life could be in a place that many assume was all axes and ale. You look at the braids, the oils, the smoke curling into the rafters. You're not just in a Viking village, you're part of it now, at least for tonight. The longhouse begins to quiet as the older members of the village doze off near the fire, but your curiosity keeps you wide awake. Someone hands you a smaller clay pot with a cork stopper. It's warm and it smells acidic, like vinegar that's been through some things. You glance at your host. Urine, you ask, hoping, just hoping you're wrong. She beams. Old urine, aged nicely. Ah, of course. Turns out, you're about to witness the first step in the Viking hair care routine, a rinse using stale urine known as lant. And before you recoil too far into your cloak, consider this: urine, especially when allowed to ferment, becomes a source of ammonia, natural cleaning agent. In a world without soaps or clarifying shampoos, this was the closest thing to a deep cleanse. You watch as one of the women carefully pours the yellowish liquid over her long, pale braid, which she has draped into a carved trough. She lets it soak, massages it in at the scalp with her fingers, then rinses with cold water fetched straight from the snowmelt outside. Cleans the scalp, she says proudly. Kills lice, too. You're not convinced, but her hair does look surprisingly shiny. And, to be fair, your own hair feels like a helmet of frozen hay right now in another corner of the room. A teen girl carefully crushes herbs, juniper berries, thyme, and sweetgrass into a powder, which she later sprinkled into the urine rinse. Smells nicer that way, she offers, shrugging. Historians still debate whether this urine treatment was a practical necessity or carried spiritual or ritual significance. Some suggest it was both: clean scalp, clean spirit. Others argue that the method was more common among the working class, while noble women had access to imported oils and perfumes. Either way, no one argues that Vikings were lazy about hygiene. Quite the opposite. As your nose adjusts, sort of, you begin to appreciate the layers of this process. It's more than sanitation, it's bonding. The women chat, tease, stories, and sing softly as they work. One tells of a sea raid gone wrong. Another remembers a midwinter marriage that ended with a goat eating the wedding feast. You learn that once the cleansing phase is over, the hair is dried carefully over low smoke. This not only dries it, but also infuses it with the scent of oak or pine wood, depending on what's burning in the hearth. The smoky aroma becomes part of the personal fragrance, sort of like Viking dry shampoo. Your dry shampoo also seasoned. Your clothing and lungs. Someone offers to wash a lock of your hair with the rinse. You hesitate for a second too long, and they take that as a yes. The cloth is warm and wet, and yes, it does sting a bit. But after a moment, the sensation becomes oddly comforting, like you're being welcomed. You've stepped into a cycle older than any record, a ritual born of necessity, adapted with resourcefulness, and elevated to something almost dash elegant. Just as you're settling into the rhythm, a child runs by with a chicken under one arm and what appears to be a hair comb carved from bone in the other. "Yours now," she yells, tossing it into your lap. The chicken squawks its disapproval. The comb has a tiny engraving at the end, a swirling design that looks suspiciously like a dragon, ... or possibly a confused cat. You try the comb. It works. Actually, it works really well. Laughter bubbles around the fire pit. Someone's retelling a story of a woman who once braided her husband's beard so tightly before battle that he couldn't open his mouth to yell. He survived, but only by scaring the enemy into thinking he was cursed. There's something sacred here, not in a grand temple sense, but in the way people care for one another, even while scrubbing their scalps with fermented liquids. It's gentle, rhythmic, human. Outside, the wind howls again. A few flakes of snow dance past the shutters, and the scent of herbs and smoke swirls in the warm air like a lullaby for the senses. You realize you haven't thought about the cold for a while, and you're starting to understand. In the Viking world, haircare wasn't a luxury. It was a form of survival, a way to reclaim control, a gesture of pride in a land that constantly tried to strip you of softness. So, when your host offers you another cup of warm broth and asks if you'd like to try the full hair routine tomorrow, including the sap and seal fatu, nod without hesitation. You're in now, hair and all. You awaken slowly, as if the dream you were having didn't end so much as it simply shifted into something colder. Your back protests as you sit up on the low pile of furs, your breath visible in the dim morning light that seeps through the gaps in the longhouse's timber walls. You stretch carefully, every vertebra cracking like frost-splitting wood. Somewhere nearby, a pot hisses gently over an ember-lit hearth, and the scent of damp smoke and melting snow curls into your nostrils like a greeting. The bone comb from the night before is still nestled in your hand, smooth and cool, with its carved swirls now faintly polished by the heat of your palm. It feels oddly significant, like a key to a world you hadn't known existed. You run it through your hair, which is surprisingly less straw-like than yesterday. There's still the faintest scent of campfire and pine resin, but also something else. Something ... earthy, old, cleansed, in its own ancient, fermented way. Your hostess, whose name you haven't quite caught, though she smiles like she's known you for years, appears beside you, her braids now bound up and gleaming in the firelight like ropes of polished amber. In her hands, she holds a small wooden bowl. Steam rises from it, curling in delicate ribbons. "We begin the real work today," she says, with a twinkle in her eye. "Conditioning for strength, scent, and if you believe the story's blessings, you follow her outside." The door creaks open into a world of snow-muted sound and silver light. The village is still quiet, save for the soft crunch of boots and the whistle of wind slipping between huts. Out in the courtyard, a few women are already gathered around a large iron cauldron suspended above a low fire. The smoke is thick and fragrant, woodsy, sharp, and laced with a hint of something sweet. You approach slowly, and as the heat touches your face, you catch the scent in full. Pine resin, animal fat, oak ash, and what might be crushed herbs, lavender, perhaps, or something more elusive. One of the women stirs the thick mixture with a long stick, the blend glistening like golden sap. It's viscous, glossy, bubbling gently, and humming with intention. Every motion feels deliberate, sacred even. This, she explains, is the balm for hair, for scalp, for soul. The balm is allowed to cool slightly before each woman takes a small amount with her fingers, just enough to coat the fingertips. They begin working it into their hair from the roots, massaging slowly as if offering a prayer. You watch in silence, mesmerized by the ritual. The hair absorbs the salve greedily, transforming from brittle and dry to dark, rich, and smooth. Some of them add pinches of ash or powdered charcoal to subtly alter the hue of their hair, steel blue, earthy gray, even deep brown black. Others braid in small strands of dyed wool or fragrant herbs. You're handed your own portion. It's warm in your palm, thicker than honey, yet smoother than wax. It smells like sap and snow and bonfire and age. You hesitate only for a moment, then begin to rub it into your scalp, imitating the slow circular movements of the women around you. At first, it's sticky, then warm, then ... comforting ... The balm seems to draw the cold out of your bones, replacing it with something ancient and living. You close your eyes for a moment. All around you, the quiet murmur of voices blends with the crackling of firewood and the whisper of wind drifting over rooftops. Someone nearby chuckles. "Don't worry, it gets easier," she says. "Just don't drop your hair in the fire." That's happened more than once. Laughter ripples gently through the circle. They tell stories as they condition, some real, others fantastical. One woman claims her great-grandmother seduced a Danish nobleman with nothing more than her hair. Another swears by a love charm hidden in a braid. Someone remembers a cousin who once disguised herself as a man, went to sea, and returned 2 years later with more gold than questions. Hair, it seems, is not just decoration. It is disguise, defense, and declaration. The conversation flows like warm water. You learn that different styles of braiding mark different statuses. 2 braids for unmarried girls, a single tight knot for wives, a coiled bun wrapped in perfumed cloth for widows. Hair isn't just personal, it's political, social, emotional, a silent language made of strands and symbolism. Some braids, one woman whispers, hold grief, others love, others still secrets. She points to her own braid, where a few threads of silver wool are woven in. "This one is for my sister. She's gone now, but I carry her with me." You suddenly feel the weight of your own hair differently, as if every strand could be a thread in a tapestry of memory, a portable monument. Children run by in the snow, tossing bundles of dry grass and laughing as they try to braid the tail of a very unimpressed goat. You watch them for a moment, then turn back to your mirrorless reflection in the sheen of the balm on your hands. You're beginning to understand what it means to belong to this place, even if just for a day. Back inside the longhouse, the fire is livelier now, the room buzzing gently with energy and scent. One of the older women leans in, sniffs the air around you, and nods approvingly. "Smells like you've been here for years," she says with a grin. You settle near the fire once more, hair tucked behind your ear, scalp tingling faintly from the warmth of the salve. Around you, the voices continue weaving stories into the walls, into the smoke, into the long, slow rhythm of winter life. It's not just about keeping warm, it's about keeping memory, keeping each other. The wind outside picks up again, brushing snowflakes against the longhouse like a soft, persistent whisper. Inside, the warmth holds steady, low, pulsing gently through the thick furs draped along the benches and the stone hearth at the center of the room. You're beginning to forget the sensation of cold fingers, of tight shoulders. You're becoming a creature of the longhouse, smoke-scented, hair-slicked, comforted by wood and wool. This morning, the focus turns to braiding. It's not just styling, it's engineering, signaling, ceremony. Every motion has weight, every twist a story. Your hostess sits you down in front of her, her hands already busy, dividing your new conditioned hair into sections with a precision that suggests she could do this blindfolded. You feel the gentle tug, the weaving rhythm, the low hum of a song beneath her breath. There's something incredibly intimate in the act, soothing, repetitive, like a lullaby for your scalp. You don't braid just for beauty, she explains, fingers still working. You braid so you don't lose strands in the fire, or in battle, or in bed. Around the room, other women are at the same task. Some braids are thick ropes down the back, others coiled like crowns. A few girls practice on each other with clumsy determination and much giggling. Some women adorn their braids with beads carved from bone, amber, and wood. Others tie in colored wool or small feathers. You notice one woman threading tiny shells through her hair, each one catching the firelight like a wink. Those shells came from a trader across the sea, someone says. He thought he was getting a cloak in return. She gave him her old one, full of moth holes. The room erupts in low laughter. As the braiding continues, you realize how practical it all is. Braids protect. In a land where wind cuts like knives and smoke clings to everything, loose hair is a liability. Braids keep it controlled, strong, ready for chores, for hunts, for war. You hear stories of how braiding techniques were passed down like family recipes. One girl explains that her mother taught her a knot pattern that resembles their family's hunting trap. Another says her grandmother taught her how to plait her hair with twigs and resin to make it stiff enough to poke an annoying cousin. You raise your eyebrows. She shrugs. He deserved it. Historians, you recall, still debate the deeper meanings of these styles. Some argue the designs had tribal or clan-specific codes. Others believe they were devotional, axe-woven prayers, knot by knot. One theory suggests braids even had legal implications. Certain styles were reserved for women of certain ranks, and copying them could be seen as a social offense. But here, in the longhouse, no one seems too concerned with rules. There's joy in the process, laughter, teasing, bursts of song. A woman starts humming a tune, and slowly others join in. The melody is slow, haunting, repetitive, in a way that wraps around you like warm cloth. You don't understand the words, but the feeling lands somewhere deep in your chest. Your hostess finishes your braid. It feels tight, but comfortable, like armor for your scalp. She hands you a shard of polished metal so you can see it, a crude mirror, but enough. Your hair gleams, parted neatly down the center, braided into two thick ropes that frame your face. Tiny sprigs of dried herbs have been tied in near the ends. You look ready, she says. For what, you ask? She grins. For life. Later, as you step outside for a breath of fresh air, you notice a young man adjusting his own braid short, tight, with a feather pinned just above his temple. You realize the care isn't limited to women. Hair is everyone's business here. Everyone carries their story on their head. Two girls walk past, discussing which braid to wear for the upcoming festival. One wants something elegant. The other insists on something that makes her look dangerous but poetic. You suppose that's a style worth aspiring to. You spot another woman braiding the hair of an elderly villager, her hands slow but practiced. The old woman smiles softly, eyes closed, lips moving as if in prayer, or maybe she's just reciting the names of all the people whose hair she once braided. As the day stretches on, you remain close to the fire, occasionally reaching up to touch your braid. It feels ... earned, not like something decorative, like a quiet badge, a woven link between you and everyone else who's ever knelt on these floors, listened to these songs, and trusted someone else's hands with their story. By now, your scalp tingles less from the balm and more from something emotional. You're part of a tradition older than most written languages, a secret told in 3 strands. And as the wind howls once again outside, you begin to think that the Viking world, for all its cold and hardship, had a remarkable way of warming the spirit one braid at a time. The late afternoon settles like a thick woolen blanket over the village, casting the longhouse in a golden, flickering haze. Shadows stretch across the timber walls, swaying gently with the flames, and the smells of wood smoke, leather, and pine fill the air like an invisible lullaby. You sit cross-legged on a fur-covered bench, your freshly braided hair still slightly damp from the snowmelt rinse. Now fragrant with herbs and warm resin, your hostess places a small bowl in your hands. Inside, a mixture of dried leaves and sap glistens in the firelight. She nods toward it, her eyes twinkling. Perfume, she says, as if the word alone is enough to conjure enchantment. Perfume in the Viking world is a curious thing. You expect maybe floral notes or something sweet, but this is not the age of bottled fragrances or atomizers. This is an era when scent is survival, identity, power. You lean in and sniff. The mixture is smoky, sharp, and herbal. There's a whisper of lavender, yes, but also something deeper, tar, perhaps, and juniper, and the wild bite of birch bark. Alcatro de Madeira, she explains, lifting a finger to her own collarbone, where a thin line of dark salve gleams. Faintly, tar oil keeps the cold out, and the men curious. She winks. You're not sure if she's joking. The women begin passing around little wooden boxes, each carved with delicate pattern swirls, spirals, and runes. Inside are scent satchels filled with dried angelica, rosemary, and burnt moss. These are tucked into braided hair, into the folds of cloaks, or even sewn into the hems of tunics. Some carry them purely for fragrance, others for luck, still others for love. You watch as one girl carefully unwraps a scrap of cloth and reveals a tiny piece of amber embedded with what appears to be an insect. She rubs it between her fingers and then lightly presses it to her temples. Calms the spirit, she says quietly. Another woman offers you a thin ribbon dyed with fermented berries. It smells of earth and vinegar, but as she ties it into your braid, you're struck by how complete it makes you feel. Like now your hair isn't just cared for, it's dressed, adorned, alive. The men, too, are not absent from this ritual of scent and presentation. At the far end of the longhouse, a group of warriors sits around a separate fire pit. Their braids are shorter, thicker, often wrapped in strips of leather. One of them is carefully applying a mixture of goose fat and smoked garlic to his beard. You blink, unsure if you heard that correctly. "Smells like strength," he says. Without looking up, another dabs a pungent mixture of clove and pine tar behind his ears. One combs his beard with something that looks very much like a fishbone. You begin to understand. Even in a world where war and labor are daily rhythms, there is still time for presentation. Scent is social currency. It declares how well you live, how well you're cared for, and perhaps how well you love. As the evening stretches toward twilight, the air in the longhouse grows thick with these ancient perfumes. The fire pops and spits, casting dancing shadows across fur-lined shoulders and braided hair. Someone plays a low melody on a bone flute, its sound soft and winding like smoke itself. You lie back slightly, your shoulders sinking into the warmth of your cloak, your senses filled with wood and earth, and something warm like honey that has no taste but still coats the heart. Around you, conversation slows, the world narrows. The glow of firelight softens into a cocoon. There's a moment, just a moment, where you wonder what you smell like now. You inhale, and it's hard to tell. Pine, resin, juniper, maybe even a little wood tar. But more than anything, you smell like this place, like this moment, like someone who was here, who was welcomed, who braided their story into another's hands. Outside, the wind dies down. The snow drifts quietly against the door. Inside, the perfumes of the past linger long after the stories stop. And in the fading light, you begin to drift, warm, fragrant, and content. Night has fully arrived now, but the longhouse doesn't sleep all at once. Instead, it sinks slowly into a kind of half-slumber where some voices whisper beneath furs, others murmur near the hearth, and only the occasional creak of timber or shift of wool-covered shoulders breaks the silence. Outside, the wind is gentle now, brushing snow against the wooden walls like a soft lullaby in a language you're beginning to understand. Tonight, the longhouse feels smaller, cozier, wrapped in warmth and scent and history. You settle beside a cluster of women who are carefully rearranging their braids, not to look fresh, but to signal something. This, you're told, is festival night preparation. It's not a grand holiday or religious rite, just a gathering, a seasonal celebration of light in the dark, of stories in the cold, of life continuing despite everything. But for many, this is the night when braids matter most. You see older women helping the younger ones, tying ribbons, pinning carved beads, tucking small twigs of evergreen into loops. Each adornment has a meaning. Some are for love, some are for strength, some are for remembrance. You are invited to watch. You're offered a ribbon dyed a deep red maroon, almost, and asked if you'd like to wear it. "It means endurance," someone whispers. You nod, and it's gently tied into your braid, the knot resting just behind your ear like a secret. You begin to notice the details. One woman braids a single white feather into her hair, a mark of a child lost long ago. Another pins a small piece of antler near the nape of her neck. "For courage," she says, her voice steady. You spot braid clasps made from copper wire, tiny bells, and one woman whose braid is wrapped entirely in linen, like a ribbon of silence. And then there's the scent. The room smells different now, stronger, richer, It's not the pine tar and goose fat of earlier. This is softer, more deliberate. Someone tosses a bundle of herbs onto the fire, crushed lavender, angelica root, and something that smells like dried apple peel. The smoke rises slowly, coiling into the rafters, settling into everyone's hair, clothing. Memory. The mood shifts from preparation to performance. Women walk, turn, pause. They admire one another's hair, trading compliments, advice, laughter. It's like a fashion show. If the runway were made of packed earth and the outfits carried the weight of generations. Someone begins singing Ya Lo, rhythmic chant that feels more like a heartbeat than a melody. It's in Old Norse, a language you don't understand, but something in it makes the hair on your arms rise. You feel it rather than follow it. The topic of romance slips into conversation, as it always does on nights like this. The young women speak in hushed tones about warriors with good braids and bad manners, about boys who forget herbs but remember eye contact. You catch the phrase, "He smelled like smoke and rain," and wonder if that's praise or warning. You learn that scent and hair play an enormous role in courtship. A braid can invite a glance. A certain oil one with clove or rosehip can invite a second. You hear stories of girls who sent messages through ribbons, left sprigs of rosemary in borrowed cloaks, or braided shared secrets into each other's hair before a voyage. You begin to understand. Viking romance didn't always need words. It had hair, it had scent, it had firelight glances across a longhouse crowded with smoke and wool. Someone nudges you and nods toward a quiet corner where a woman and a man sit close, braiding each other's hair in silence. The moment is so intimate, so sincere, that you feel almost embarrassed to look. That's how you know it's real. Your host says softly, "You let someone into your hair, and that's that." You watch as the firelight flickers off rows of intricate plaits and shining beads, as the stories settle into the air like dust, and the longhouse becomes not just shelter, but theater, a living memory. A girl near you tucks a small dried flower behind her ear and smiles at no one in particular. You realize at that moment that these acts, these braids, these scents, these rituals are not just to attract or impress. They are to remember oneself, to say, "I am here, I am someone, I am braided with purpose." You close your eyes for a moment and breathe in. The scents are layered: smoke, pine, tar, lavender, sweat, memory. You feel warm, you feel included, and for the first time since arriving, you don't feel like an observer. You feel like you belong. The next morning greets you not with sunlight, but with a pale silver glow, muted and indirect, filtering through the cloudy skies like a soft apology for another cold day. Snow has fallen lightly overnight, dusting the rooftops and walkways. In a delicate layer of white, like powdered sugar over rough bread, the village stirs slowly, as if wrapped in the same fog of dreams you've just emerged from. Your braid, slightly tousled from sleep, still holds the shape of last night's ceremony. A bit of ribbon peeks out near your shoulder, and you reach up to touch Etia's, still there, still tied, still meaningful. Endurance. You remember, and now, more than ever, it feels earned. Today is quieter. The festival is over, the scent of herbs still lingering in the corners of the longhouse, like perfume clinging to a memory. Most of the women are tending to household chores, but even these are infused with care and ritual. You follow your host outdoors as she heads to the stream, a small wooden pail balanced effortlessly on her hip. And here's where you see something unexpected despite the freezing temperature. She kneels beside the partially frozen stream, dips her hands into the frigid water, and begins rinsing combs, haircloths, and a few narrow brushes made of tightly bundled horsehair. Her sleeves are rolled back, and her breath escapes in soft white clouds as she works. You shiver just watching. Clean tools mean healthy hair. She says simply, as if that explains everything, and it does. The Viking hygiene routine was more involved than most give it credit for. Weekly or even monthly bathing wasn't uncommon, especially on Laugardygr, which would later evolve into our word Saturday, the washing day. And while full body washing was difficult during the heart of winter, care for the face, hands, and hair never stopped. You begin to understand how the attention to grooming was not just vanity, it was social capital. The tools themselves are fascinating. Combs carved from antler, often with intricate designs etched into the spine. Some are bifurcated for different hair textures. One even has a tiny compartment built into it for storing herbs or scented cloth. Another has a rune carved into the side protection, you're told, against tangles and bad spirits. Children are responsible for washing these tools. And you spot a young boy diligently brushing out strands of his sister's hair from a shared comb. He seems to take the job seriously, pausing every few seconds to inspect his progress like a craftsman. Back inside the longhouse, a different kind of preparation begins. A group of women are making herbal infusions, boiling water, mixed with dried angelica, nettle, birch leaves, and a bit of apple peel. These infusions are used not only for drinking, but also as final rinses for the hair. They give a subtle shine and scent, and are believed to promote strength and calmness. Some even whisper that they bring dreams. You sit near the hearth as your host pours a ladleful of the hot infusion into a shallow wooden bowl and places it before you. "Dip your ends," she says. You lean forward, cautiously lowering the tips of your braids into the warm, fragrant liquid. Steam rises gently. It feels strange, but comforting. The scent is mild and earthy, like forest air after rain. As you sit there, soaking your hair in herbal water, the longhouse around you hums with low conversation. You hear snippets about someone's cousin who fell in love with a traveling harpist, about a healer in a nearby village who claims she can tell your fate from how your hair tangles in the wind. There's talk of spring, of future journeys, of the first thaw when braids will be loosened and new ones formed, braided with flowers and morning dew. Someone nearby begins weaving a new braid knot for fashion, but as a protective knot. You learn that braids were sometimes tied in specific patterns before travel, childbirth, or even storms. Some were believed to trap bad spirits or keep one's soul tightly woven. During times of trial, you're offered a chance to try. A woman with calloused hands and soft eyes helps you form a 3-strand warding braid, each strand representing mind, body, and memory. She explains that if you unbraid it too soon, you'll forget your place. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you don't want to risk it. The fire crackles. Snow continues to fall outside. Your braid drips lightly into the bowl of herbs, and your reflection ripples faintly across the surface. You feel steady, rooted, held. This care, this ritual of rinsing, braiding, infusing isn't just about appearance. It's about rhythm, identity, quiet resistance against the wild unpredictability of the world. And as the afternoon drifts slowly into the soft gray of early evening, you realize your time here is changing. You not with noise or drama, but with tenderness braided into silence. Evening comes like a sigh. No dramatic sunset, no burst of color, just a gradual deepening of shadows. A quiet hush that spreads across the village like a woolen cloak. The longhouse fills again, not with the energy of the festival, but with a softer, steadier rhythm. You find your place near the hearth, where your fingers are warm and your braid has dried to a silky weight down your back. Tonight, the air is thick with stories, not just tales told aloud, but ones folded into gestures, shared glances, the way a hand rests on a shoulder, or how two women sit side by side, their braids touching. You realize, as the firelight flickers against their hair, that braids can speak, and tonight, they're telling stories you haven't heard yet. You're invited to sit in what they call the Circle of Old Styles. It's not an official name, just something the women say with fondness. Here, the older villagers, women with silver-streaked braids and fingers shaped by decades of weaving, demonstrate the kinds of hairstyles they wore before children, before husbands, before responsibility. The kind of braid you wore when you danced on snow without boots, when you ran across frozen fields chasing a hawk just to see it fly. One woman shows you a braid that wraps around the crown of her head, held in place with a carved ivory pin. This, she says, I wore to my wedding. He stepped on it during our first dance. She laughs softly, and the fire catches the gleam in her eye. Another woman, quiet and straight-backed, reveals a double-twist braid once reserved for shield maidens. She doesn't speak much, but when she ties a length of faded blue cloth into the braid's center, you understand the weight of her silence. Later, someone tells you she lost her younger sister in a battle years ago and never changed her braid since. Across the fire, a younger girl listens in awe, her own braid still loose and simple. She clutches a sprig of juniper, freshly gathered, and meant to be woven into her next braid for protection, for clarity, for luck in love. She asks you what your braid means. You pause, unsure how to answer. But before you can speak, she smiles and says, "It means you're one of us now." The moment sits in your chest like warm tea on a cold morning. Later, the group shifts to a kind of braid-sharing circle. You watch as each woman takes a turn undoing part of another's braid and weaving it anew, sometimes copying a style from memory, sometimes improvising. The intimacy of it all is striking. No mirrors, no ego, just trust, warmth, and quiet murmurs as fingers move through hair like water over stone. You offer your own braid to a woman who claims she once braided the hair of a queen knot. A real queen, she admits, but a merchant's wife who insisted on being treated like one. Her fingers are swift as she works. She tells you how some women used to hide herbs in their hair for strength. Others carried ashes of loved ones woven into a small leather pouch tucked deep in a knot. You feel your scalp tingle not from the pull of hair, but from the weight of these lives, these acts of memory, these tiny sacred containers hidden in plain sight. There's a moment where everyone is silent. It isn't awkward, it's full. The fire cracks gently. A braid is tied off. Someone stifles a yawn. The longhouse breathes. Then, from the back corner, an older voice begins a song, low and winding. It starts like a whisper and grows with each verse, the words old and soft as worn linen. You don't know the meaning, but the melody folds around you, stitching into the weave of the night. You lean your head back against the wall and feel the warmth of the braid against your skin. You think about how something as simple as hair dead cells, technically, streeted here like a living language, a fabric of selfhood, a connection to past, present, and even future. Outside, snow falls again. Inside, a woman gently tightens the end of her daughter's braid, kisses her forehead, and sends her to bed. Another girl leans into her grandmother's lap, her hair already half undone, as she drifts off to the sound of lullaby hums. You close your eyes too, just for a moment, and as you do, you realize you're woven in now, not just your hair bud, your story. You've become a strand in someone else's braid, and someone else has become a strand in yours. Evening comes like a sigh. No dramatic sunset, no burst of color, just a gradual deepening of shadows, a quiet hush that spreads across the village like a woolen cloak. The longhouse fills again, not with the energy of the festival, but with a softer, steadier rhythm. You find your place near the hearth, where your fingers are warm and your braid has dried to a silky weight down your back tonight. The air is thick with stories, not just tales told aloud, but ones folded into gestures, shared glances, the way a hand rests on a shoulder, or how two women sit side by side, their braids touching. You realize, as the firelight flickers against their hair, that braids can speak. And tonight, they're telling stories you haven't heard yet. You're invited to sit in what they call the circle of old styles. It's not an official name, just something the women say with fondness. Here, the older villagers, women with silver-streaked braids and fingers shaped by decades of weaving, demonstrate the kinds of hairstyles they wore before children, before husbands, before responsibility, the kind of braid you wore when you danced on snow without boots, when you ran across frozen fields chasing a hawk just to see it fly. One woman shows you a braid that wraps around the crown of her head, held in place with a carved ivory pin. "This," she says, "I wore to my wedding. He stepped on it during our first dance." She laughs softly, and the fire catches the gleam in her eye. Another woman, quiet and straight-backed, reveals a double-twist braid once reserved for shield maidens. She doesn't speak much, but when she ties a length of faded blue cloth into the braid's center, you understand the weight of her silence. Later, someone tells you she lost her younger sister in a battle years ago and never changed her braid since. Across the fire, a younger girl listens in awe, her own braid still loose and simple. She clutches a sprig of juniper, freshly gathered, and meant to be woven into her next braid for protection, for clarity, for luck in love. She asks you what your braid means. You pause, unsure how to answer. But before you can speak, she smiles and says, "It means you're one of us now." The moment sits in your chest like warm tea on a cold morning. Later, the group shifts to a kind of braid-sharing circle. You watch as each woman takes a turn undoing part of another's braid and weaving it, a nun sometimes copying a style from memory. sometimes improvising. The intimacy of it all is striking. No mirrors, no ego, just trust, warmth, and quiet murmurs as fingers move through hair like water over stone. You offer your own braid to a woman who claims she once braided the hair of a queen knot. A real queen, she admits, but a merchant's wife who insisted on being treated like one. Her fingers are swift and confident. As she works, she tells you how some women used to hide herbs in their hair for strength. Others carried ashes of loved ones woven into a small leather pouch tucked deep in a knot. You feel your scalp tingle not from the pull of hair, but from the weight of these lives, these acts of memory, these tiny sacred containers hidden in plain sight. There's a moment where everyone is silent. It isn't awkward, it's full. The fire cracks gently. A braid is tied off. Someone stifles a yawn. The longhouse breathes. Then, from the back corner, an older voice begins a song. Low and winding, it starts like a whisper and grows with each verse, the words old and soft as worn linen. You don't know the meaning, but the melody folds around you, stitching into the weave of the night. You lean your head back against the wall and feel the warmth of the braid against your skin. You think about how something as simple as hair dead cells technically is treated here like a living language, a fabric of selfhood, a connection to past, present, and even future. Outside, snow falls again. Inside, a woman gently tightens the end of her daughter's braid, kisses her forehead, and sends her to bed. Another girl leans into her grandmother's lap, her hair already half undone. As she drifts off to the sound of lullaby hums, you close your eyes too, just for a moment, and as you do, you realize you're woven in now, not just your hair but your story. You've become a strand in someone else's braid, and someone else has become a strand in yours. By midday, the longhouse is once again full of life, though it hums at a gentler frequency than the days before. The chaos of the festival has given way to the rituals of routines, still layered with care, but less adorned. Outside, the snow melts slightly under a rare break in the clouds, and puddles shimmer in the frozen earth like quiet reminders that spring will return. Eventually, today, your hostess announces it's time to learn about the higher class hairstyles, those once worn by noble women, wealthy merchants, daughters, or priestesses of the old gods. These styles are not built for warmth or practicality. They're meant for statement, for ceremony, for leaving an impression that echoes down a corridor long after you've passed through it. She ushers you into a small side chamber, a quieter corner of the longhouse, where light filters through thin, animal skin windows, and the floor has been swept meticulously clean. Laid out on a woven cloth are decorative items rarely seen in everyday use. Thin silver pins, small beads of amber, carved wooden combs stained with red dye, and fragments of finely woven ribbon in colors not found in nature-bright reds, ocean, blues, and that vivid violet again, the color of dusk just before it disappears. These, she says, gesturing broadly, were worn by those who didn't have to carry water. There's no malice in her voice, just fact. These hairstyles were for those whose lives allowed the luxury of time, delicacy, and extra hands. A few of the women begin to demonstrate. One twists her long braid upward into a crown, securing it with narrow copper hooks shaped like raven beaks. Another coils hers flat against her skull and tucks in thin slivers of polished stone that glint every time she turns her head. But the most elaborate style is performed in complete silence. Two women work together on a third, combing, separating, threading. Her braid is divided into 6 segments, each woven with different materials. Wool dyed red, fine strands of silver, tiny beads carved from bone, and a faint thread of scented leather. The scent drifts through the rumor-thy, spiced subtly. Makes you think of someone sitting by a window with a book no one else is allowed to read. The style takes nearly an hour, and when they're done, she looks like someone from a tapestry, a figure from a myth, preserved in thread and time. You are invited to sit for your own demonstration, not the full noble treatment. They laugh, just a courtship braid. You hesitate, but curiosity wins. Your hostess works carefully, slowly, weaving your hair into a half-crown braid at the back, while the front is left looser, more natural. She tucks in 2 beads of smoky quartz, one for insight, one for softness, and ties it off with the maroon ribbon. Now a familiar presence in your hair. She tells you that in some villages, girls would walk through town wearing such braids during market days, subtly inviting interest. A man who noticed could return the gesture by gifting a ribbon, or more daringly a carved hairpin. If she accepted and wore it publicly, the courtship had begun. You wonder if this quiet form of flirting isn't more powerful than anything shouted across a bar. A glance, a braid, abandoned. Suddenly 2 people are speaking in a language no one else can hear. Historians debate whether Viking women had full autonomy in courtship. Some records suggest yes, especially in the more isolated coastal communities. Others point to arranged pairings. But oral traditions preserve countless tales of women choosing, signaling, and even breaking off engagements with nothing more than a snipped braid returned at the village hearth. That thought lingers with you, hair as contract, hair as voice. As the braid is finished, you touch it gently. It feels lighter somehow, not because it's small, but because it carries intention. Later, as you walk through the village, you see others wearing similar styles, though yours, they whisper, suits you especially well. Someone even offers a pin carved with runes, a gift not of romance, but respect. You accept it with a bow and tuck it into the base of your braid. There's a pride here, but not the showy kind. It's the kind that comes from cultural memory, from knowing how to carry oneself, how to move through the world with grace. Even when the world is made of snow and silence, you sit on a low wall near the edge of the village and look out over the frozen hills. Your breath fogs the air, and your braid catches the sun, just barely, like the last light in a long evening. And for a moment, you don't just feel part of this place. You feel like you've always been here. The wind shifts again in the afternoon, a rolling gust that brings with it the scent of salt and ice. It cuts across the village like a slow wave, rattling wooden beams and setting the longhouse's roof to creaking in quiet protest. You pull your cloak tighter and move back inside, following the smoke and voices to the fire. Today's gathering is smaller, more intimate. The festival visitors have departed. The extra braids, beads, and bone pins have been packed away. What remains is the core, those who stay behind, who live this rhythm day after day, season after season. And today they prepare for something far more vulnerable than a festival, nightfall travel. You learn quickly that leaving the village at dusk, or even dreaming of travel through the forests or across the frozen marshes, requires preparation, not just physically, but spiritually. Not in the sense of incantations or rituals, but in the sense of mental readiness, of carrying protections for many. That means adjusting their hair. There is a braid known in this village simply as the thread braid. It isn't a style for beauty. It's a talisman of braid woven with a single strand of red thread, knotted 3 times. Each knot represents something different: safety, memory, and return. You're taught how to weave it by a woman with hands rough from years of dyeing cloth. She moves slowly, explaining each twist, each pull. You can braid it into your hair or your sleeve, she says. Some even braid it into the harness of a horse or the blanket of a child. Her voice drops to a whisper. Some never unbraid it, ever. You watch as each person in the longhouse ties one insome visibly, some hidden behind ears, beneath hoods, along the seam of a glove. One girl braids hers into her scarf, then presses her face into it as if it holds warmth that fire cannot give. There's a calm quiet as these braids form. No one jokes, no one hums. It feels like everyone remembers someone who didn't return. Historians rarely write about things like this. Braids for battle, yes. Styles of nobility, certainly. But these small acts, these private weavings, meant to say, please, let me come back, or remember me if I don't, are rarely recorded. And yet you see them here, everywhere. Your hostess helps you tie your own. You choose a thread, the color of aged brick deep, warm, strong. You weave it behind your ear, tucking it low and tying the final knot with your eyes closed. You'll keep it, she asks softly. You nod. You will. The rest of the day passes in that same quiet tone. People sharpen blades. They boil porridge for the road. They pack dried herbs, bundles of wool, wrapped bits of smoked fish. The air smells of fire, metal, salt, and pine resin against someone is melting it to seal the seams of their boots. You notice one woman sitting near the fire, brushing her hair out, slowly, not to restyle it, but to loosen a braid. Her fingers tremble slightly. She's undoing the thread braid of someone who didn't return last winter. No words are spoken. A younger girl gently holds the cut thread in her lap. You watch and you understand. Hair here is more than beauty, more than status, more than protection. It is remembrance, it is ritual, it is language, spoken silently in loops, in knots, in the weight of something left woven too long later. As the sun sinks low and the village prepares for night, someone sings not a song for sleep, but a traveling song, measured, slow, almost like a prayer. One of the verses speaks of braids so tight they hold back the wolves. Another speaks of the wind weaving through your hair to carry your name home. You lie back on your furs as the shadows deepen, and you touch the thread braid behind your ear. You feel not fear, but steadiness, because you've been braided. And now even the night knows your name. By now, your place in the longhouse feels less like a guest's and more like a thread in the very weave of its walls. You no longer wait to be invited to sit, to speak, to watch. You're simply there, like the furs by the fire or the smoke curling through the rafters. And with that quiet belonging comes something unexpected: responsibility. This morning, your hostess greets you not with warm broth or a new oil to sample, but with a task, tending to the children's braids. You blink in surprise. You're not a mother here. You're not even a villager. But the look in her eyes is kind and confident. You've earned this, so you sit, knees folded beneath you, as three small forms shuffle toward, uberfoot, sleepy, sticky with whatever they managed to get into before breakfast. Their hair is a wild map of tangles, twigs, and inexplicably flowered dot. The youngest plops herself into your lap without ceremony and begins to hum tunelessly. The others follow, curling beside you with the blind trust only children can give. Your fingers go to work. It's harder than it looks. The comb tugs, the strands resist. One child squirms. Another begins reciting a story about a fish with teeth made of gold. The rhythm returns, the same rhythm that filled the longhouse during the festival. The rinsings by the stream. The night of ancestor braids, twist, separate, smooth, braid, tie. The styles for children are simple, 2 plaits, or sometimes a loose wrap coil around the crown. But each braid carries meaning. A tight braid means behave. A ribbon tucked in means your aunt is watching. A small carved bead near the end means you did well at market. Hair is how children are praised here, or warned, or loved. You're handed a small satchel filled with bits of dried apple skin and mint leafsa, soft perfume, to be dabbed onto the ends of the braids. One of the women tells you this keeps away bad dreams. The children nod solemnly as you finish the last braid. The little girl in your lap sighs contentedly, leans her head back against your chest, and murmurs, "Now I smell like I won't get eaten by a forest," which, you blink. Is that a common fear? She shrugs. Only if your hair's messy. Later, you help the older children learn to braid for themselves. One is practicing on a length of yarn. Another is earnestly trying to braid his dog's tail. The dog, to his credit, seems resigned. There's laughter, some tangled frustration, but also pride when the fingers get it right, when the strands lay neatly, when the tie holds strong. One girl shows you a style she invented herself, a looping braid she calls the rain catcher. It's wildly impractical, but charmingly ambitious. And when she ties it off with a twist of wool, the whole group claps like she just finished forging a sword. You think back on your own childhood, whatever and wherever it was, and can't remember ever feeling this scene, this braided into something. Here, hair connects generations. A mother braids a daughter. A grandmother rebraids after tears. A sibling practices on their twin until both look like they've been caught in a polite tornado. But it's not just about beauty or neatness. It's about presence. A braid says, "I am cared for." A braid says, "I was noticed this morning." A braid says, "Someone spent time on me, and I mattered enough for that." As evening comes, the children are gathered for a storytelling hour, a circle by the hearth where tales are told with the kind of reverence reserved for kings and stars. You sit nearby, watching them lean on each other, braid ends draped over shoulders like tendrils of moss. They are quiet now, dreamy-eyed and full of soot and sugar. You lean back, your own braid still tight from the morning, and feel a strange ache behind your eyes. You weren't prepared for this part. You weren't prepared to fall in love with a culture through the heads of its children. But you have, and now Somewhere behind your ear, a small red thread sways gently with each breath, as if nodding in agreement. The wind has changed again. It's softer now, no longer biting or bold, but almost curious, as if it's peeking through the wooden seams of the longhouse, wondering what's happening inside. And inside, it's quiet, not with silence, but with contentment, with completion. This morning is devoted not to celebration, not to storytelling, but to something far more subtle: maintenance, of tools, of space, of hair. You rise slowly from your sleeping place, the furs tangled and warm. Your braid, surprisingly, has held through the night. The ribbon is still knotted, the strands still smooth. There's a hint of mint and apple peel, lingering at the end's remnants of the children's perfume satchel, now folded carefully into your pouch. The women are gathered near the center of the room, not with the excitement of a festival or the reverence of an ancestral ritual, but with the focused calm of routine. Today is the day they comb and clean their tools. You're handed a shallow basket filled with wooden combs, pins, and small brushes, each one familiar, no objects you've seen passed hand to hand across laps through generations. Some have snapped teeth, others are stained from years of oil and resin, but none are discarded. Here, even a comb that can no longer comb becomes a keepsake, a teaching tool, or a token placed in someone's braid box to remember them by. You sit cross-legged among them, joining in the rhythm. Clean, dry, sand, oil, wrap. One woman is carefully sanding the edge of a comb with a bit of fine stone. Another coats the teeth of hers with a thin layer of seal oil to prevent splintering. Someone else wraps linen around the handles of older pins to give them new life. As your fingers work, your hostess explains how each tool carries memory. This comb, she says, lifting one carved from driftwood, was found washed ashore during the great winter. We believe it came from another village, one that didn't survive. She rubs her thumb across its surface. We don't know whose it was, but we keep it clean. We honor it. You're struck by how haircare here is an ecosystem one, where nothing is wasted, where every gesture, every object is folded back into the story. You think of the world outside this longhouse, the speed of it, the disposal of things, the way hair is cut, thrown away, dyed over, forgotten. But here, everything is woven, recycled, revered, remembered. A young girl asks to borrow your comb, and you hand it to her gently. She examines it carefully, then says, "I'll wrap it for you." She takes a strip of pale green wool and braids it around the spine of the comb, finishing with a knot shaped like a leaf. "For softness," she says, "and because you listen well." Later, as the combs dry on the hearth and the pins are lined up neatly in rows like tiny sleeping birds, someone begins brushing her own hair, not to style it, not to prepare for anything, just to feel the weight of it, just to smooth it, just to tend to what is hers. You mirror her, brushing your braid out slowly. The strands fall like ribbons, heavier now, warm from your body's sleep. As you detangle, you begin to feel time pass through your fingers. Each knot undone feels like a small memory released of the festival, the rinse, the night of the traveling braid, the children's laughter, the room of ancestral strands. You think, absurdly, that you might be brushing out someone else's memory too. Maybe they left it with you. Maybe that's what hospitality is here. You finish brushing. You gather the strands again, And this time, no one helps. You braid it yourself. You start slow, twist, fold, tighten. You remember what you've been taught. You tie in a thread of red, not for travel this time, but for keeping stillness. You wrap the green wool around the base, the same color the girl gave you. You tuck a pin behind your ear. You feel settled, not finished, but folded in that night. Before sleep comes, your hostess tells you a proverb. The braid remembers more than the voice. And you believe her, because when you lie down on the same furs, beneath the same roof, now full of echoes, you don't need to speak a single word to feel understood. Your hair will say everything for you. The snow has stopped. Outside, the landscape is covered in a soft, fresh layer of white so untouched it almost glows. The village is quieter today, not because there's less to do, but because winter has settled in fully, and with it comes the rhythm of patience. You sit by the fire, cup in hand, the steam from your herbal drink curling into the cold morning air. Around you, the longhouse is in motion, slow, deliberate, restorative. People mend cloaks, reinforce boots, and inspect the beams for signs of ice cracking the wood. But the heart of the day isn't in those tasks. Today is about preparation for solitude. Your hostess explains it as she braids her hair into a tight spiral at the crown of her head. When the snows get heavy, she says, we stay inside, not just here, but here. She taps her chest gently. It's the time for thinking, for being still. And as with everything else in this place, hair is part of that stillness. The braids worn during these deep winter days are different close to the scalp. Low profile, designed not for display, but for endurance. They'll stay put for days, even weeks. Minimal maintenance, maximum meaning. You're invited to participate. A woman sits beside you with a basket filled with braiding cord-soft wool strands, thin leather strips, and narrow bands woven with tiny beads. She picks up your hair, which now carries the texture of countless rinses, combings, and a memory's worth of oils and perfume. Her fingers work slowly. The braid she makes is tight, but not harsh. It follows the shape of your skull, winding, like a path worn by repetition. This is your winter braid, she says. It listens more than it speaks. The cords she weaves carry different purposes. The pale gray wool is for clarity. The dark leather is for endurance. A single white bead near the end represents silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of listening. As she braids, she speaks softly. Some people say winter makes things die, but it's not true. Winter makes things invisible, quiet. Underneath the snow, the roots keep growing. You think of your own thoughts, how much they've changed since arriving, how your pace has slowed, how your hands no longer fumble with the comb, how your breath sinks with the smoke rising from the fire, instead of the clock ticking in your mind. You don't feel erased. You feel covered, preserved, braided for keeping. Others in the longhouse are doing the same. No one talks much. There are no stories tonight, just the sound of combs passing through hair, of braids forming, of the quiet tug and tie of people preparing to be alone together. A young man sits by the door, braiding his own hair while watching the snowdrift past the window. His style is simpler, just a single, thick rope down his back, but you see him thread something shiny through it, a sliver of antler, shaped like a crescent moon. You ask about it later. He shrugs. For patience, he says. The snow always melts. You find that profound that night. You're shown how to wrap your braid for sleeping tied with cloth, secured loosely with a band at the end to prevent it from unraveling. During dreams, you don't want to lose your thoughts while you sleep, someone says. They'll wander off and never come back. You follow their instructions carefully, your fingers moving like you've done this 100 times. You tie the last knot, and there's a stillness in your chest that feels earned before lying down. Your hostess places something beside your furs, a braid box, small, wooden, decorated with a swirling pattern you recognize but don't fully understand. Inside, there's a space for your comb, your ribbon, and any loose strands you find when you unbraid. These are yours, she says, even the ones you shed. You run your fingers over the lid. This you've learned not just how they braid, but why. You've listened long enough for the braid to begin speaking back, and in the long silence of the sleeping house, your winter braid presses gently against your head, reminding you you are held, you are part of something. Even in stillness, you are woven. The final morning arrives quietly, as most things here do not, with fanfare, but with presence. You're awake before the fire is fully stoked, wrapped in your cloak, listening to the sound of breath. The village is still cloaked in white, but there's a change in the light of faint warmth returning to the sky, like a promise being cleared of its dust. Your braid, now well worn and tightly coiled in its winter shape, rests heavily on your shoulder. You touch it absently, then, with intention. You remember each thread that made it tread for memory, green for softness, gray for clarity, and the way each piece was tied in not just by fingers, but by meaning. Today, you are told, is the day of the last tranca. The words are spoken gently, with a mixture of affection and ritual weight. It is not an ending in the dramatic sense. It's a marking, a transition. The braid that is made today is a braid you carry forward, out, away from the longhouse. It will hold your time here, like the knots of a net, letting nothing slip away. You are seated near the central hearth, where the embers glow a steady orange. Around you, a few familiar faces gather, not all, just the ones who have touched your hair, shared a story, handed you a comb or a ribbon. No one speaks of leaving, but everything feels like goodbye. Your hostess begins slowly. Her fingers know your scalp now. She starts with a gentle brushing, slow, reverent, as if dusting off something sacred. You breathe deeply, eyes half closed. The room smells like smoke, pine, lavender, and that same resin balm from the first day. Then she begins to braid. This time, it is a 3-part braid wrapped around the side of your head, then laid down the back like a river of woven memory. Into it, she tucks small elements from your time here, a single juniper berry, dried and fragrant. From the festival day, a thin strip of red thread, saved from your travel braid, a pinch of dried mint, crushed gently and rubbed into the base, and finally, a small twist of green wool, braided near the bottom, her gift, unspoken. Each piece is woven in with soft murmurs, not words, just the sounds people make when they're working with care. You sense others watching, not in judgment, but in witness. Your braid has become communal property, now a story they've helped write. It is finished. Your hostess ties it with a knot you do not know, a kind of loop fold, whisk that feels final and enduring. She steps back, looks at your face, and smiles. You'll untie it, she says, when you are somewhere new and quiet and ready to listen again. You nod. Your throat is tight, but not with sadness, with fullness. Before the day moves on, the others bring their own keepsakes. One woman gives you a comb carved from birch simple, worn perfect. Another slips a herb pouch into your hand, tied shut with flax thread for sleeping, she says. The youngest child presses something sticky into your palm, a piece of honeyed bark wrapped in cloth, for when you forget what sweet tastes like. You hold each gift with care, tucking them into your pouch as if they are made of glass and story. As the sun climbs, casting long shadows across the snow and into the longhouse one last time, you begin preparing to leave. There's no ceremony, no announcement. You simply stand, and the others do too. You exchange embraces, some light, some lingering dot. No one says goodbye. Here, the words don't fit. Only one woman whispers something as she presses her forehead gently to yours. Braids can always be redone. You step outside. The cold greets you, familiar now, like a friend with rough hands. Your boots crunch the snow. The braid rests down your back, warm against your spine, swaying gently with each step. You don't look back. You don't need to. Everything you've seen, heard, touched, everything you've braided is with you. Now, inside your hair, inside your chest, inside your silence. And now, you rest, not because the journey is over, but because it has woven itself into you, quietly, completely. You lie back beneath a sky, muted by snowfall, your cloak drawn round your shoulders, the final braid still intact against your neck, warm, soft, weighty. The world is quiet here. No longhouse, no voices, just breath, wind, memory. Your braid shifts gently with each inhale, like a sleeping animal curled close. You feel its presence, not just in your hair, but in your chest, in the slow, steady rhythm of having been seen and held and remembered. The snow doesn't fall heavily now. It drifts. It dances. Each flake a thread descending from above, light as whispered stories, cold as clean water. The hush of the landscape is complete. The sky doesn't speak. It simply listens. And you listen to dot, to the sound of nothing, to the stillness after care, to the hush that comes only when you are no longer trying to hold on, because what matters is already tied in place. You shift slightly, your fingers brushing the braid. You smile without meaning to,